In the tapestry of human conflict, few positions carry as much weight as the first and the last to die. Today I'm standing in a relatively small cemetery outside of Mons, Belgium. St. Symphorium Military Cemetery. It is a Commonwealth cemetery. Essentially, anyone who fought under the flag of the British Empire would be buried here. Commonwealth soldiers share the ground with German graves. Despite its small size, it holds within it a grim irony. Across all the battlefields of Europe, where millions died, here in this small plot, the first and the last British soldier to die during the Great War face one another. Only a few meters apart, they have over 4 years of horrible conflict separating them. Nearby is the last Commonwealth soldier to die as well. John Henry Parr never intended to make history. Born in 1897 to a London milkman, John was the youngest of 11 children in a family where death was no stranger. Growing up on Lodge Lane in North Finchley, the boy found work as a golf caddy after leaving school. Like countless young men of his generation, John was drawn to military life, regular meals, adventure, and the chance to see the world. In 1912, at just 14 years old, he walked into a recruitment office and boldly claimed to be 18. His comrades quickly nicknamed him Old Parr, a gentle mockery of his youthful appearance. John became a reconnaissance cyclist, riding ahead on bicycle to scout enemy positions, one of the Army's most dangerous roles. When war erupted in August 1914, his unit was dispatched to France as part of the British Expeditionary Force. On the morning of August 21, 1914, just 17 days after Britain declared war, John and another cyclist received orders to ride northeast of Mons to locate advancing German forces. In the encounter that followed, John made the decision that would define his legacy. He remained behind to hold off a German patrol, while his companion raced back to report their findings. The 17-year-old boy who had once caddied for gentlemen golfers became the first British soldier to die in the Great War. His body wasn't recovered during the war, and his mother would spend years writing desperate letters to the War Office, never receiving the closure she sought. It would be years before his makeshift grave, presumably dug by the Germans who killed him, was found, and he was moved to the Commonwealth Cemetery nearby. Private George Edwin Ellison, however, had beaten the odds for 4 long years. Born in York in 1878, he was already a veteran soldier when the war began. By 1911, he had left military life to work as a coal miner in Leeds, where he married his wife Hannah and welcomed their son James in 1913. When the war came, George found himself serving the 5th Royal Irish Lancers. At 40 years old, he was ancient by trench warfare standards, yet he survived encounters that claimed thousands of younger men. He fought at Mons, lived through Ypres, and witnessed the first use of tanks and poison gas. On November 11, 1918, George was on patrol in the woods outside of Mons, the same town where he had first seen action. The armistice had been signed at 5 a.m., but orders remained. Fighting would continue until 11 a.m. The 11th hour of the 11th day. At 9:30 a.m., with just 90 minutes remaining until peace, a German sniper's bullet found its mark. The man who had survived 4 years of mechanized slaughter died, knowing that in 90 minutes the guns would finally fall silent. George left behind Hannah and young James, who celebrated his 5th birthday just days after learning his father would never come home. Born in 1892 in Nova Scotia's Port Williams, Private George Lawrence Price, a young Canadian farmer, grew up where rural life moved with the seasons. Like countless men of his generation, he was working the wheat fields of Saskatchewan until conscription reached into Canada's farmlands in 1917. 25-year-old George answered the call. The 28th Battalion became George's new family as he crossed the Atlantic in 1918, arriving as part of the Allied buildup that would finally break the Western Front's deadlock. By November of 1918, even junior soldiers sensed victory was within reach. On November 11th, George's unit advanced through Mons, the Belgian town where British forces had first tasted defeat in 1914. At 10:58 in the morning, with church bells preparing to ring out peace just 2 minutes away, George and his patrol were clearing houses in Ville-sur-Haine, pursuing the last German resistance. In those final moments before the guns fell silent forever, a single rifle shot cracked through the morning air. One German sniper claiming one last victim. George collapsed into his friend Art Goodmurphy's arms. When the bells finally tolled 11 and the guns fell silent across the Western Front, George had been dead for just under 2 minutes, long enough to earn the terrible distinction of being the last British Empire soldier to die in the Great War. Today his grave is meters from the war's first and last British casualties, creating an accidental trinity, the war's alpha and omega, a reminder that whether death comes on the first day or final minute, the loss is still absolute. 17-year-old John Parr, Canadian George Price, and 40-year-old Brit George Ellison tell the history of World War I without having to say anything. A young man dying in his first encounter with the enemy, and an older man killed after years of battle, 90 minutes from peace, and another man shot seconds before the war finally ended. All three events happening within 10 miles from each other, but 4 years apart. Despite all the bloodshed, all the destruction, the war essentially ended right where it had begun. Of the roles of men who died in the final moments of the war, perhaps the most complex figure was Private Henry Nicholas John Gunther, a German-American from Baltimore whose death 1 minute before the armistice embodied all the contradictions of the war's end. Despite the late entry of the United States to the war, it would be an American who would be last to die. Born in 1895 to German immigrant parents, Henry worked as a bank clerk in Baltimore's Highlandtown neighborhood. When drafted in 1917, he was promoted to supply sergeant, until military censors intercepted a letter where he complained about conditions and advised a friend to avoid the draft. Henry was demoted from sergeant to private, a humiliation that devastated him. His fiancée broke off their engagement, unable to bear the shame. Among his comrades, Henry became sullen and withdrawn, volunteering for dangerous assignments in an apparent attempt to prove his courage and patriotism. On the morning of November 11, 1918, at 10:59 a.m., with 60 seconds remaining until peace, Henry made his last stand. Against orders and desperate pleas from his comrades, he charged a German machine gun position. The German gunners, aware that the war would end in less than a minute, stood up and waved him away, shouting warnings in broken English. But Henry pressed forward and fired his rifle. They had no choice but to respond. A 5-round burst from the machine gun struck Henry in the head, killing him instantly. Witnesses swore that the rumbling of artillery ceased at the exact moment his body hit the ground, as if the war itself had claimed its final victim. The numbers from the Great War defy comprehension. 8.5 million military dead and 13 million civilian casualties. And consider the tragic mathematics of the war's final day. Despite the armistice being signed at 5 a.m. on November 11th, fighting continued for 6 more hours. In those 6 hours, approximately 2,738 soldiers died, more than the amount of Americans killed on D-Day. Among November 11th's casualties were soldiers from every nation. French runner Augustin Trebuchet died at 10:45 in the morning, carrying a message reading, "Muster at 11:30 for food." The German casualties from that final day remain largely anonymous, an estimated 4,000 soldiers becoming the most forgotten victims of the war's senseless final hours. Today, St. Symphorien Cemetery holds a profound silence. The graves of John Parr and George Ellison face each other across a narrow path, their proximity a coincidence that has become one of history's most poignant symbols. Between their deaths lies the story of an entire generation. Millions who marched away singing patriotic songs and returned as statistics in casualty reports, if they returned at all. The Great War transformed not just Europe's political map, but the very nature of human conflict. St. Symphorian holds 513 soldiers from both sides. Here, German and British, Canadian and French rest side by side. The cemetery tells the war's evolution. Elaborate German headstones reflecting their belief in permanent occupation, and simple British graves following the Commonwealth's philosophy of equality in death. The Alpha and the Omega of the Great War sleep on in Belgian soil, their stories forever intertwined, their sacrifice forever remembered, and their lesson forever relevant. The war's true cost cannot be measured in victory or defeat, but only in the lives it claims and the futures it destroys.